All right, everybody, it's our favorite time of the week again when we get to answer a few of your questions. Saagar, what's up first?
Number one, from Ian Sunaf. It's a very personal question. It's a nice question. How are you able to do research for the show without being sucked into rabbit holes that take you away from important daily tasks? We don't. That's the answer. I get in trouble all the time for thinking about nuclear war or for being obsessed with some like thing when I'm supposed to be cleaning or like doing dishes or like anything else. I wish I could tell you something the opposite. Usually I just have to be like, all right, enough, turn it off, especially at night. If something crazy happens at night,
yeah,
it's over. It's not gonna happen. I remember when the Roe versus Wade piece came out. I have a very rigid nighttime routine. And my girlfriend is like, Saagar, you gotta wake up, it's Roe. And I was like, fuck. So immediately I get on the phone and then we have all these text messages and we're like, okay, so we have to like we have to redo the whole show. Mm-hmm. That's not very often, but you always have to be prepared for a situation like that. So you get a little on edge.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah, that's
when
true.
When you're in it,
For me, it's very day to day. I mean, having kids, like you have no choice
that's
but
true.
to like,
you have to get
they demand your full attention and presence and whatever. So, and sometimes I do have a hard time switching from like sucked into the news mode and like being present with them mode. It can be hard to switch those things off and on. I mean, we both have significant others who also are like news and politics junkies.
Part of the issue.
I think that
part of the problem.
Well, I don't think I think it's part of the problem. It's also part of like I think it's necessary. Frankly, I don't know if anyone else would like put up with the habits that we ultimately have. But yeah, if it's a day where I'm not, with kids are at school and I'm not around them as much, I can more easily get sucked into the rabbit hole. But when I'm with them, like it's just really no choice but to kind of, they demand it.
I don't know. It really is a tough question. And I have yet to, by the way, I actually think we handle it way better than a lot of people in this business.
True.
Some people in this business are
as
genuinely like mentally ill, cannot do anything else.
Totally true. Yeah. And that messes with your mind. It really, there's a real balance that I find between being super sucked into like the day-to-day fluctuations of politics and being able to take a step back and have sort of like higher level thoughts. And it's important to be able to maintain that balance because if you're just all in on, what's up on Twitter and what's the latest news article and whatever, you can actually miss some big picture things that are really important to try to bring. So I also try to think about maintaining that balance, which is where, taking occasional like days off and stuff like that also helps to kind of reset and get that big picture back.
Very true.
All right, next question we have from Cameron Javier. Approved journalist list. Have you guys ever considered posting a list of Krystal and Saagar approved journalists? No. I often hear you guys mentioning you don't follow entire news channels, but individual journalists. I feel like sharing such a list would allow those of us less attuned to the media world to properly filter the BS out of our news and ultimately lead to truth-seeking journalism being rewarded with views. I understand your impulse in that direction, but it seems like a bad idea.
Yeah, that's a terrible idea.
Ultimately, if we write a list, certainly someone on that list is going to do something, mess something up, whatever. So ultimately, the judge of who we think is doing good work on a particular piece is who we bring on the show, whose articles we, talk about on the show, who we put a lot of trust and faith into. Like, that's, I think, the probably the best way to approach it.
Yeah, that's exactly. I don't want to take responsibility for that, which is sometimes people are good, sometimes they're bad. Listen, this
people are complex.
What your question presumes is that you can outsource this. And the sad part is you can't. You have to make up your mind for yourself. You got to look into it. And at the end of the day, you shouldn't be taking as gospel anything that we or anybody says. So,
well said.
All right. Next question from Victor Gitau. I want to say that. Liz Truss ousting not as good as advertised. I understand Liz Truss was very cringe and the worst politician ever, but I'm worried about the idea that capital market actors can basically oust a G7 world leader through their own sovereign bonds. Should we actually celebrate her resignation? That's a really interesting question.
It's a good and
kind of a tough question, actually.
It is. When we talked, when Kyle and I talked to Owen Jones, we talked a little bit about this because you could easily see the shoe being on the other foot, as the three of us are all, me and Owen and Kyle are all leftists, of having left government come in that basically raises taxes on the rich to expand the social safety net, and you could see that same sort of market reckoning basically forcing out that leader as well. So I think you're right there, that there is a bit of a double-edged sword. Part of why I do see it as a little bit different is Truss's whole ideology is faith in the markets. Like my ideology is definitely not related to any sort of faith in the stock markets whatsoever, or the financial sort of elites. But hers is all about market fundamentalism. So there's a deep irony in the fact that the very markets that she is so obsessed with and believes in their perfection and their infallibility were the ones who rendered judgment on her government and ultimately forced her out.
Yeah, that's not a bad point. My friend Joe Weisenthal has basically been saying the same thing. He's like, look, no matter what you think, this is effectively like a coup by the Bank of England, which, like you said, if you're going to put your total faith in it, then I guess you have to abide by the results. But I do think there is something there. I'm not smart enough to explain exactly the mechanics of what they did. But as I understand it, their independence and all of that triggered some of the market conditions which made this possible. But that doesn't underlie the fact that it was a bad idea in the first place.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah, yes, okay. Indeed.
All right.
Next question from Asher Miller. Dems college debt GOTV campaigns. Considering the risk posed by Republican-led efforts to block Biden's college loan forgiveness, why aren't Democrats using this as a campaign issue right now to GOTV the millions who stand to lose out if the executive order is blocked? I think that's actually a really good question, because I know Democrats afterwards, they got nervous about this. Like Tim Ryan in Ohio ran away from the student loan debt forgiveness program. But given the sophistication of online advertising in particular, maybe they're doing it and we're just not seeing it. It seems like you could really target young voters who stand to benefit from this program, who have been helped, where it's in jeopardy if Republicans, are able to overturn Biden's efforts. It seems like you could do a campaign that might be effective, that would be super targeted to people who have this debt and might benefit from the program. Like I said, maybe they're doing it and we don't see it, but I see no signs of it. And I do think it's yet another massively missed opportunity for the Democrats on one of the things that's the most tangible material policy that they've deployed.
I don't disagree. Whether you have a different view of the policy or not, to not advertise it is just dumb.
You're talking about 43 million people who stand to benefit.
I mean, I would
to not tell this, hey, we did this for y'all, and it's in jeopardy with the other guys. It seems like it could be a motivator, but
totally agree.
What do I know?
All right. Last question from Joseph Fieldbinder. Haight in Washington, D.C. Hello, Krystal Saagar. Big fan of the show. My wife and I had a blast at the live show in Chicago. Shout out to you, Joseph.
Nice.
Keep up the good work. The question, you have said you are hated in D.C., and this got me thinking. Are there any times this manifested in a specific incident or made it abundantly evident to you? The way that this world works is like a system, which is that the system takes care of its own. So you get invited to certain things. That's mostly what it is. And then sometimes when you start to hammer at the system, those things go away. And then eventually they dry up to the point where you're not in the system anymore. And I think that's where we're at right now.
Yes.
It's like there were many things, and I know this because I was there. Yeah, I used to attend many of these things. I know that they still happen. I'm still friends with some of the people who are involved. It's just like the powers that be, there's all these dinners and off-the-record events and minglings and all these other things, which are a hallmark of official Washington, of which I've been, so I can tell you. I mean, they're not that great, but they exist. And now they don't exist anymore for our show. That's fine with where we're at, but that's really the reference, which is that it's all about none of it will ever be said because it doesn't need to be. If that makes sense.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. No, and I mean, I've definitely, and you probably have too, lost friends and definitely acquaintances. There's a whole broader circle of acquaintances that you no longer hear anything from whatsoever.
But I like it that way.
I'm 100% fine with that. And actually, it makes it easier to do.
When it's not your friend, when you're like, am I going to suffer social consequences? Now I'm like, I know the answer is no, because it already has happened. So.
Indeed.
There you go. That's the instance that we can talk about.
Yes, I'll stick with my soccer moms out in King George. They still like me.
We'll see you guys later.